20 most inbreds families in world history. What happens when families chase pure bloodlines at any cost? From mighty empires to forgotten villages, history is filled with rulers and communities undone by their own traditions. Join us as we uncover the shocking hidden price of inbreeding, where power, isolation, and genetics collide in stories as tragic as they are unforgettable. The Whitakers of West Virginia. Hidden away in the remote hills of odd West Virginia, there's a family whose life feels less like reality and more like something pulled straight out of a chilling Appalachian folktale. But this isn't a ghost story. It's painfully real. This is the unsettling story of the Whitakers, a family so cut off from the outside world that many of their interactions have been reduced to guttural noises, grunts, and even animal-like barks. It's not just heartbreaking, it's disturbing on a level that's hard to put into words. And no, this isn't just another strange rumor cooked up online. Back in the year 2000, photographer Mark Leda made the brave decision to step into their world and document what he found. Through his camera lens, he revealed a life most of us could never picture. A family bearing physical deformities and severe cognitive challenges, tragic outcomes of generations of inbreeding. Those haunting photographs didn't just capture faces. They exposed a hidden reality that most people would never otherwise see. But the Whitakers remain wrapped in secrecy. Folks in town, whether out of loyalty, compassion, or perhaps sheer discomfort, rarely speak openly about them. Questions linger in the air. Where did the family originally come from? Just how severe are their conditions? And why does no one give clear answers? Some whisper that the Whitakers may be distantly tied to a once prominent family in the region, though the rumors are just that. Rumors with no solid proof. Still, the mystery fuels the fascination, making their story even more haunting. Mark Leda didn't just pack up and leave after his first visit. He felt compelled to act. By launching a GoFundMe campaign, he tried to offer them some relief, shining a small light into a very dark reality. His work brought national attention to the devastating consequences of generational inbreeding, reminding us that behind every whispered legend, there are real people enduring unimaginable struggles. The Whitakers' tragedy even echoes other disturbing cases, like Australia's notorious Colt family, where isolation and secrecy created a cycle of abuse, deformity, and suffering that shocked the world. The Colt family of Australia. The Colt family, a name that would become forever linked to one of the most disturbing and eye-opening cases in modern Australian history. In 2012, authorities stumbled upon a shocking reality hidden in the remote countryside of New South Wales. A family living in near total isolation, bound together not just by blood, but by a chilling cycle of inbreeding, secrecy, and generational neglect. What investigators uncovered went far beyond the image of a troubled household. It was a tangled web of abuse spanning multiple generations, where many family members didn't even know the identity of their biological parents. Children were born from unions between siblings, cousins, and in some instances, even closer relations. Their compound lacked running water, proper sanitation, or any form of schooling. The physical conditions were appalling, but even more heartbreaking were the emotional scars carried by the children growing up in such an environment. The official investigation revealed a community cut off so completely that basic moral, social, and legal boundaries had broken down entirely. And it left Australians asking haunting questions. How could something like this happen in a modern, developed nation? How had it gone unnoticed for so long? And why didn't anyone step in earlier to stop it? The Colt case became a wake-up call across Australia. It highlighted glaring flaws in the country's welfare, education, and community systems, gaps that had allowed a family like this to remain hidden in plain sight for decades. It also forced difficult conversations about the urgent need for early intervention, better reporting systems, and stronger protections for vulnerable children, especially in remote or overlooked communities. The Fugate family of Kentucky. The story of the Fugates, living deep in the quiet hills of Kentucky's Appalachian region, stands as one of the most unusual and visually unforgettable cases of inherited genetics in American history. It all started in the early 1800s, when Martin Fugate and his wife, Elizabeth Smith, both unknowingly carrying the same rare recessive gene, settled near a small place called Troublesome Creek. What followed was a remarkable multi-generation saga of isolation, intermarriage, and a condition that gave the family a name the world would never forget: the Blue Fugates. The medical explanation for their striking appearance is methemoglobinemia, a rare blood disorder that affects the way oxygen moves through the body. The result was a distinct bluish tone to the skin, most visible in the lips, hands, and face. When 4 of Martin and Elizabeth's 7 children were born with this unusual coloring, it was clear that the recessive gene had found a foothold. And in such a remote, secluded region, that genetic legacy spread quickly. Geography played a major role in what happened next. With so few families moving in and limited chances to marry outside the community, people often married within the same tight circle. It wasn't necessarily by choice, it was simply the reality of life in the mountains. Over time, marriages between cousins, and even cases like Zachariah Fugate marrying his own aunt, helped ensure the gene remained in circulation, passing from one generation to the next. Among the many family members, one figure became especially well known: Luna Fugate, remembered as the bluest of them all. Luna's complexion was a deep, vivid blue, yet she still led a rich and enduring life. She married, raised 13 children, and lived until the age of 84. Many of her children carried the same skin tone, but accounts suggest that aside from their unusual coloring, they were strong, healthy, and capable people. Perhaps the most moving glimpse into their perspective comes from a family member, once asked a simple but profound question: if you could change back to the way you were, would you do it? The answer came after a pause: I'm not sure, really. That quiet response speaks volumes. It reflects both acceptance of their unique identity and the complicated feelings of carrying a legacy that made them famous for all the wrong reasons. After hearing the heartbreaking stories of the Whitaker, Colt, and Fugate families, what surprised or haunted you the most about the effects of isolation and inbreeding in these cases? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Habsburg Dynasty. For centuries, the Habsburgs weren't just rulers. They were the ultimate power brokers of Europe. Their sprawling family tree connected empires, their marriages shaped political landscapes, and their name became almost interchangeable with royalty itself. Yet, behind the glittering halls of their palaces and the heavy crowns on their heads lay a darker truth, one that would eventually weaken and even destroy their legacy: the devastating impact of inbreeding. The Habsburgs had a strategy, and on the surface it made perfect sense. They married with precision, linking their bloodline to other monarchies, securing alliances, and tightening their grip on vast territories. At first, it was a winning formula. Their influence grew, their reigns lasted, and outsiders were kept at a distance. But slowly, that plan turned inward. In their determination to keep the royal blood pure, they began arranging marriages between close relatives: cousins, uncles and nieces, even aunts and nephews. The cost of these unions wasn't visible right away, but it grew heavier and more tragic with every generation. Imagine the royal court in all its splendor: massive chandeliers casting light over gold-trimmed walls, nobles dressed in silks and jewels. And among all that grandeur, heirs were being born with visible signs of genetic strain. None became more infamous than what history calls the Habsburg jaw. This wasn't just a minor quirk of appearance, it was a severe deformity, a jaw so enlarged and protruding that some members of the family struggled to chew food properly or even speak clearly. And that was only one of many consequences of their narrowing gene pool. By the late 1500s, the damage, especially within the Spanish Habsburg branch, was undeniable. Children were born sickly and frail. Many died in infancy, while others grew into adulthood plagued by chronic illnesses, weakness, or mental impairment. Yet the cycle continued, driven by fear that marrying outsiders might cost them their power. In their eyes, preserving the dynasty mattered more than the health of the family itself. The most heartbreaking symbol of this decline arrived in 1700 with the death of King Charles II of Spain. He was the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, and his life embodied the dynasty's downfall. Sickly and infertile, he suffered from severe physical deformities and cognitive struggles. Unable to produce an heir, he marked the end of his branch of the family line. With his death, centuries of Spanish Habsburg power collapsed, not through war or revolution, but through the slow, painful consequences of their own choices. The Pitcairn Islanders. It all started back in 1789 with one of history's most famous mutinies, the uprising aboard the HMS Bounty. A group of desperate sailors, worn down by the brutal discipline of the British Navy, turned against their commander and vanished into the wide, uncharted Pacific. They weren't just fleeing a ship, they were chasing the dream of a life lived on their own terms. Their search brought them to Pitcairn Island, a tiny, remote patch of land hidden far from any authority. There, together with several Tahitian women they had brought with them, the mutineers carved out a new settlement. But cut off from the rest of the world, what developed wasn't just a community. It became a fragile social experiment, one shaped by isolation, secrecy, and the inevitable pressures of a limited gene pool. By 1817, nearly all of the original mutineers were gone. Only John Adams remained, carrying on after the death of Ned Young, who had helped him lay the groundwork for a new society. Adams leaned heavily on the Bible, using religion as the backbone for law and order on the island. On the surface, this gave the community structure, but underneath that order, life was far more complicated and far more troubling. As generations passed, the population grew slowly, eventually peaking at around 200 people by the year 1936. Yet, in such an isolated place where every family was closely connected and outside norms had long since disappeared, dark patterns began to take hold. Sexual abuse, especially involving minors, quietly became normalized, passed down as if it were simply part of island life. Hidden from the world, these practices spread from one generation to the next. The truth didn't come to light until the early 2000s, when New Zealand authorities launched an investigation that shocked the outside world. What they uncovered were decades of abuse, with some of the island's most prominent men, including community leaders, convicted of crimes against children. For the first time, Pitcairn was forced to confront the darkest parts of its history. Today, fewer than 50 people still call Pitcairn home. They remain cut off, carrying the weight of a painful legacy that left scars stretching across generations. The Darwin-Wedgwood Family. Charles Darwin, one of the greatest scientific minds of the 19th century, the man who gave us the theory of evolution, also lived a private life that reveals a more complicated, even troubling story. Darwin chose to marry his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood, continuing a practice that was not only accepted, but often encouraged among wealthy and well-connected families of the time. Back then, cousin marriages weren't looked at as unusual or inappropriate. In fact, for the upper classes, they were considered a smart move. Families genuinely believed they were protecting what mattered most: intelligence, creativity, fortune, and social standing, by keeping those traits within their own bloodline. To them, this was less about romance and more about preserving and even enhancing a superior family legacy. But for Charles and Emma, that decision came with heartbreaking consequences. They went on to have 10 children, yet 3 of them died young. While not all the causes were carefully recorded, historians and scientists now suspect that the fragile health of the Darwin children, ranging from frequent illnesses to early deaths, was worsened by the fact that their parents were so closely related. It's a difficult truth. When families marry within their own circle, they increase the chances of harmful genetic traits being passed along. And there's a striking irony here. While Darwin himself spent his career studying heredity, variation, and the survival of the fittest in nature, his own household offered a painful, real-life example of how genetic closeness can backfire. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. If there's anything we can improve, take a moment to leave a comment. We're always looking to get better. Thanks so much. The Ptolemaic Dynasty. The Ptolemaic Dynasty is often remembered as the glittering final chapter of ancient Egypt's royal story. A time of towering temples, immense riches, and unforgettable figures like Cleopatra. Yet, behind all the pageantry and power lay a dangerous practice that slowly poisoned the dynasty from within: incest. It all began after the death of Alexander the Great, when his trusted general, Ptolemy I Soter, seized control of Egypt. From there, he established the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which would endure for nearly 300 years. To legitimize themselves as true heirs of the pharaohs and to present themselves as divine beings, the Ptolemies revived one of Egypt's oldest royal traditions, marrying within the family. But this wasn't about romance, and it wasn't just tradition. It was a calculated political strategy. Brothers were wed to sisters, uncles to nieces. Each union was designed to protect the throne, preserve their pure bloodline, and keep outsiders from gaining power. Over time, however, the cost of these choices became painfully clear. Generation after generation, the dynasty showed increasing signs of inbreeding depression, weakening both body and mind. If you look closely at portraits and coins from the Ptolemaic era, you'll notice that many rulers appear unusually heavy or bloated. This wasn't just an artistic quirk. Scholars now believe those features may point to inherited conditions. Diseases like Erdheim-Chester or familial multifocal fibrosclerosis that can cause swelling, obesity, and even mental decline. Passed down through their tangled family tree, these disorders may have directly undermined the dynasty's ability to govern. Perhaps the most famous example is Cleopatra VII, the last and most iconic of the Ptolemies. She married not one, but two of her younger brothers, continuing the very cycle that had plagued her ancestors. Cleopatra's intelligence, charisma, and political brilliance allowed her to stand toe-to-toe with powerful Romans like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But her lineage had already been weakened by centuries of inbreeding. The fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty wasn't just about Rome's rise. Its downfall was also written in its DNA. Behind the palace walls, generations of medical issues, mental instability, and internal power struggles slowly eroded the dynasty from within. By the time Rome arrived, the cracks were already so deep that the collapse of Egypt's final royal line was, in many ways, inevitable. The Bourbon Dynasty. The Bourbons once stood at the center of Europe's power. For centuries, they ruled over two of the continent's greatest kingdoms, France and Spain, guiding wars, shaping alliances, and leaving behind a legacy of grandeur and influence. But hidden within all that prestige was a dangerous practice that steadily eroded their strength: inbreeding. Like many ruling dynasties of their time, the Bourbons were obsessed with preserving their royal blood. From the 1500s well into the early 1900s, marriages were carefully arranged, not for love, but for power. Cousins wed cousins, uncles married nieces, and at times the connections were even closer. To the outside world, these unions reinforced the illusion of divine right and kept political control neatly contained within the family. But beneath the gilded surface, the cost was measured in human frailty. Over the generations, troubling patterns began to emerge. The Bourbon line was plagued by infertility, hemophilia, epilepsy, and perhaps most damaging of all, severe mental illness. Modern researchers suspect that disorders such as bipolar disease and schizophrenia ran through the bloodline, fueled or even triggered by the narrowing of their genetic pool. One of the clearest examples is Philippe V of Spain, whose reign was overshadowed by deep psychological struggles. His son, Fernando VI, showed similar symptoms, evidence that these weren't isolated cases but part of a hereditary issue. By contrast, Felipe's other son, Carlos III, born to a different mother, showed no signs of mental instability. That difference suggests that introducing new genetic diversity may have acted as a safeguard, strengthening him where others had faltered. Of course, it's impossible to say with certainty that inbreeding was the sole cause of every illness or breakdown, but the consistency of these health problems across generations is too strong to dismiss. The very strategy meant to secure the dynasty's future may have instead chipped away at its vitality, weakening the very leaders who were supposed to embody its strength. Perhaps no words capture the irony of this royal paradox better than a line often attributed to a Bourbon monarch. "Now I might have my enemies, but I have the adoration of my people. You think because I'm king that I'm not also a brother?" In those words lies the tragic truth, that the power of the crown was built on the same family ties that would one day undermine it: the British royal family. The British royal family, famous, influential, and inseparable from the history of the modern world. Yet behind the glittering crowns, state ceremonies, and carefully painted portraits lies a legacy that is far less celebrated, a hidden trail of inherited illnesses born out of centuries of carefully arranged intermarriages. For generations, Britain's monarchs married strategically, linking their bloodlines with other European royals. These marriages were never just about love. They were political maneuvers designed to secure the throne, strengthen alliances, and expand influence across the continent. But as those family ties grew closer and closer, a hidden danger began to surface: the risk of passing along serious genetic disorders. One of the most well-known and still debated examples is King George III, often remembered as the Mad King. Throughout his reign, he suffered repeated bouts of mental instability, with symptoms ranging from severe confusion to terrifying hallucinations. Some historians and medical experts believe he had porphyria, a rare inherited disorder that affects the nervous system and can cause unusual symptoms, even turning urine a bluish-purple color. Others argue that his struggles may have been the result of bipolar disorder. Whatever the true diagnosis, many agree that his health was likely made worse by the close interbreeding of Europe's royal families. Ironically, the very tradition meant to keep the monarchy strong may have left one of its rulers more vulnerable. But perhaps the most devastating example of this genetic legacy was hemophilia, a condition where the blood fails to clot properly, turning even small cuts or bruises into life-threatening injuries. Hemophilia entered the royal bloodline through Queen Victoria, who carried the gene and unknowingly passed it to her descendants. Her son, Prince Leopold, lived a short life plagued by the disease, and through her daughters, the gene spread quickly into other royal households across Europe, including those of Spain, Germany, and most famously Russia. It was this spread that gave hemophilia its grim nickname, the royal disease. Across Europe, it caused tragedy after tragedy, young princes and heirs dying far too early, and royal families living in constant fear of accidents that could prove fatal. The Pharaohs of ancient Egypt. When we hear names like Tutankhamun, Ramses II, and Cleopatra VII, our minds immediately fill with images of golden tombs, massive temples, and rulers worshipped as if they were gods themselves. Yet, beneath that glittering surface of ancient Egypt's royal legacy lies a darker, more troubling truth: systematic inbreeding that left deep, lasting scars on the bloodline of the pharaohs. In Egypt, the pharaoh wasn't simply a king. He was believed to be a living god, a direct link between the heavens and the earth. Protecting that sacred status became the highest priority, and to do so, the royal family relied on a very deliberate strategy: marrying within their own ranks. Brothers wed sisters, uncles married nieces. It wasn't about love or choice, but about preserving the divine image and keeping the royal bloodline pure. This practice reinforced the pharaoh's right to rule, but the cost of maintaining that so-called purity was incredibly steep. Take the most famous case, Tutankhamun, the boy king whose reign was short and whose life ended tragically young. Thanks to modern DNA testing and scientific research, we now know he suffered from a range of genetic disorders: a clubfoot, scoliosis, and a weakened immune system. His parents weren't just related, they were full siblings. Tutankhamun's fragile health was more than bad luck. It was the inevitable outcome of centuries of inbreeding that valued legacy over biology. Even legendary figures like Ramses II, remembered for his strength and military might, and Cleopatra VII, admired for her intelligence and charm, came from the same tightly closed gene pool. While the exact effects of inbreeding on them are harder to trace, it's likely they too carried unseen consequences of a dynasty built on marrying within the family. And it wasn't just a choice made by a few rulers. For well over 1,000 years, this practice of sibling and close relative marriage was not only common but expected among Egyptian royalty. To them, the divine bloodline had to remain untouched, even if it meant passing along hidden weaknesses, frailty, or illnesses that could shorten lives. From powerful dynasties like the Habsburgs, the Bourbons, and the British royal family to the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, the obsession with pure bloodlines led to countless tragedies. In your opinion, what costly lessons has humanity learned from the trade-off between power and genetic health? The global history of inbreeding. Inbreeding, the marriage or union of close relatives, might sound shocking, even disturbing to us today. But if you look back through history, it was far more common than most people realize. And it wasn't always about a lack of options. More often, it was fueled by tradition, power, and the belief that keeping bloodlines pure would preserve strength, status, or even divinity. In the world's earliest civilizations, where kings and emperors were seen as gods on earth, marrying within the family wasn't just accepted, it was expected. Ancient Egypt offers one of the clearest examples. Pharaohs were considered divine beings, and to protect that sacred image, they often married their sisters or close relatives. The famous union of Akhenaten and Nefertiti wasn't just political, it was deeply spiritual, a symbolic way of keeping divine authority locked inside the bloodline. But Egypt was hardly unique. Centuries later in Europe, the same idea appeared in royal dynasties like the House of Habsburg, one of the most powerful families in history. For generation after generation, they arranged strategic marriages within their own circle, hoping to consolidate power and keep outsiders at bay. The result was devastating. A host of genetic disorders, the most famous being the so-called Habsburg jaw, a severe protrusion of the lower jaw that left some family members struggling to chew or even speak clearly. Along with that came infertility, frailty, and other health problems that slowly eroded their ability to lead. Outside the gilded walls of royal courts, geography sometimes played the same role. On Tristan da Cunha, a tiny island in the South Atlantic Ocean, residents were so cut off from the outside world that marrying within the small community became inevitable. Over generations, intermarriage wasn't a choice but a necessity, and it led to inherited health conditions that shaped life on the island. Here, inbreeding wasn't about ambition or power, it was simply survival in isolation. So when we look at inbreeding through the lens of history, it becomes clear that this wasn't a rare or isolated phenomenon. It happened across continents, cultures, and classes. For some, it was about preserving wealth or royal status. For others, it was about maintaining a divine image. And in places cut off from the world, it was about survival. But the outcome was often the same: a shrinking gene pool that carried hidden costs, from physical deformities to fragile health, and sometimes even the downfall of entire dynasties. The genetic consequences of inbreeding. For centuries, people had noticed that when close relatives married, something often went wrong. Children from these unions were more likely to be sickly, fragile, or to suffer from mysterious conditions that no one could fully explain. But it wasn't until the 19th century, through the quiet, careful work of a monk named Gregor Mendel, that the science behind these troubling patterns began to make sense. Mendel's simple experiments with pea plants uncovered the hidden rules of heredity, how traits are passed from one generation to the next. His findings were revolutionary. He showed that when two individuals share too much of the same genetic material, the risk of harmful recessive traits being expressed rises dramatically. In most cases, a dominant healthy gene masks a recessive faulty one. But in close relative pairings, both parents are far more likely to carry the same defective gene. That means their children have a higher chance of inheriting two copies of that flaw. And when that happens, genetic disorders can emerge in devastating ways. By the early 20th century, the science advanced even further. Sir Ronald Fisher, a pioneering statistician and geneticist, created a formula called the coefficient of inbreeding. For the first time, scientists could measure with numbers the exact probability that a child would inherit two identical genes from a shared ancestor. Fisher's work didn't just confirm what people had long suspected, it gave researchers and doctors a predictive tool to understand and even anticipate the dangers of inbreeding. And this isn't just theoretical science. The effects can be seen in real communities. One striking example comes from Pingelap, a remote island in Micronesia. In the 18th century, a catastrophic typhoon wiped out nearly the entire population, leaving only a few dozen survivors. With so few people left, generations of intermarriage were unavoidable. Over time, a rare genetic condition, achromatopsia, complete colorblindness, spread through the island. Today, a significant portion of Pingelap's population sees the world only in shades of black and white. What had once been an uncommon mutation became widespread simply because of a genetic bottleneck and the unavoidable cycle of inbreeding. Fortunately, modern science has given us tools to break that cycle. Genetic counseling and medical screening now help families understand their risks before having children. In parts of the world where inbreeding is still practiced, whether because of cultural traditions or geographic isolation, these tools are critical in protecting future generations from preventable suffering. With the severe genetic consequences now clearly explained by science, what do you think we can do to use advances in genetics and counseling to prevent such tragedies in the future? Do you believe science has the power to completely change this picture? Science against tradition, using genetics to protect the future. We've stepped into a bold new era of human history, the genomic age, where our understanding of DNA and inheritance has grown far beyond what anyone thought possible just a generation ago. And with this knowledge comes an extraordinary opportunity, the chance to confront one of humanity's oldest and most persistent problems, the genetic consequences of inbreeding. The real turning point arrived in 2003 with the completion of the Human Genome Project. For the first time in history, scientists had a complete map of the human genetic code, a blueprint that details the instructions for everything from eye color to disease risk. This achievement opened doors we never had before, making it possible to pinpoint genetic disorders with remarkable precision. And it shed light on conditions that often appear more frequently when genetic diversity shrinks, as it does in families or communities where close relative marriages are common. At the center of today's progress is genetic testing and counseling. These tools give people the ability to find out whether they carry dangerous recessive genes, genes that, if combined with another carrier, could result in serious inherited conditions in their children. For populations with a long history of inbreeding, or for those living in small, isolated communities, this knowledge has been nothing short of transformative. One of the clearest success stories comes from the Dor Yesharim program, first launched in the 1980s for the Ashkenazi Jewish community. Because this group faced higher rates of devastating genetic diseases like Tay-Sachs, the program developed an anonymous screening system. Couples could quietly learn if they were genetically compatible before marrying, reducing the risk of passing along harmful conditions. The results have been remarkable. A dramatic decline in children born with these deadly disorders. It's living proof that knowledge, when used responsibly, can save lives. But technology is only half the story. Equally important are the professionals who help families understand what the science means. Genetic counselors translate complex data into practical, compassionate guidance, helping people make informed choices about marriage, children, and long-term health. The idea of genetic counseling actually goes back to the 1940s, when scientist Sheldon Reed first coined the term and laid out its ethical foundation. Not to decide for families, but to empower them with knowledge and respect their values. Thanks to these advances, we are no longer helpless in the face of inherited risks. Today, we can identify, predict, and in many cases prevent genetic conditions before they ever take root. History shows us the dangers: royal dynasties crippled by inbreeding, isolated islands plagued by genetic bottlenecks, tragic modern families caught in cycles of inherited illness. But the future tells a different story, one of possibility, prevention, and hope. History shows us that inbreeding left scars on families, dynasties, and entire communities. What do you think was the most surprising story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey, please like, subscribe, and share back to yesterday, so we can keep exploring the past together. Thank you for watching.